Husband calls black wife worthless trash in court until her mother reveals what he didn't know. You're nothing but worthless trash. You came into this marriage with nothing, and you'll leave with absolutely nothing. Marcus Reed's venom-laced voice echoed through the cold, mahogany-lined courtroom, his face twisted in arrogant, unhinged contempt as he glared at his black wife Emily. The gallery gasped in a collective, suffocating shock, but Emily sat perfectly still, her dark, profound eyes fixed unblinking on the man she had faithfully loved and supported for 10 years. He thought he had completely broken her spirit. He thought he held all the winning cards in a rigged game. But Marcus had absolutely no idea who he was really messing with, or the sheer magnitude of the trap he had walked into. Keep watching to see the ultimate jaw-dropping karma unfold as this narcissistic CEO gets exactly what he deserves. The air inside Department 47 of the Los Angeles County Superior Court was thick enough to choke on. The heavy oak paneling, smelling faintly of lemon polish and decades of broken promises, seemed to physically amplify the tension radiating from the plaintiff's table. At the center of the imposing room sat Judge Harold Whitaker, a man with 30 years of grueling family law experience etched into the deep, unforgiving lines of his stern face. He had seen every flavor of marital destruction, from bitter custody battles to hidden offshore assets. But the blatant, unapologetic cruelty radiating from Marcus Reed was something even the seasoned, battle-hardened judge found profoundly jarring. Marcus sat beside his high-priced celebrity attorney, meticulously adjusting the cuffs of his bespoke $5,000 Tom Ford suit. He was the picture-perfect image of Silicon Valley success, sharp, handsome, meticulously groomed, and utterly ruthless. His tech company, Reed Cloud Solutions, had recently been evaluated by Wall Street analysts at a staggering $60 million, a number Marcus wore like a crown. Beside him, his lawyer, a renowned legal shark known for utterly destroying opposing spouses, was aggressively shuffling through a stack of heavily redacted bank statements, preparing to deliver the final killing blow to Emily Carter's reputation and financial future. Across the aisle sat Emily. She wore a simple, elegantly tailored navy blue dress, her natural hair styled in immaculate, regal locks that framed a face of quiet, devastated dignity. She had spent a decade building a life with Marcus, sacrificing her own youth, her career trajectory, and her peace of mind to passionately support a man who had once been sleeping on a stained futon, drowning in insurmountable student debt. Now, in the very courtroom that would decide her future, he was looking at her as if she were a piece of discarded gum stuck to the sole of his Italian leather shoe. "Your Honor," Marcus's attorney sneered, his voice dripping with condescension as he paced theatrically in front of the bench. "My client is a self-made visionary, a pioneer. He built Reed Cloud Solutions from the absolute ground up through his own unparalleled genius, sleepless nights, and pure sweat equity. The defendant, Miss Carter, has spent the last 10 years doing nothing but enjoying the lavish, luxurious fruits of my client's agonizing labor, while contributing absolutely zero to the household income or the corporate infrastructure. She is now demanding half of a tech empire she had absolutely no hand in building, conceptualizing, or managing." Emily's hands tightened around the barrel of her pen, her knuckles turning ashen against her dark skin. She didn't look directly at Marcus. She couldn't. If she did, she might lose the ironclad composure she had rigorously practiced for weeks with her own legal team. "Mr. Reed," Judge Whitaker rumbled, peering intensely over his reading glasses, his voice a low, warning growl. "The law in this state regarding community property and marital assets is quite clear. Unless you can provide irrefutable, documented evidence that the corporate assets were completely isolated prior to the marriage. I can provide the evidence that she's a parasite, Your Honor." Marcus violently interrupted, slamming his manicured hand on the heavy wooden table. He stood up abruptly, his perfectly styled, focus group-tested facade finally cracking to reveal the ugly, venomous, deep-seated entitlement beneath. "Look at her. She's worthless trash. She came into this marriage with nothing but a useless humanities degree and a pathetic sob story, and she expects to walk away a multi-millionaire. I carried her. I tolerated her endless mediocrity. She is entitled to absolutely nothing. The courtroom fell into a stunned, breathless silence. The court reporter's fingers literally froze over her stenograph keys. Even Marcus's shark of an attorney winced slightly, recognizing the unforced error of insulting a judge's intelligence and attacking a spouse so brazenly on the record. Emily slowly, deliberately looked up, her piercing gaze locking onto her husband's furious, bloodshot eyes. She didn't cry. She didn't scream or object. Instead, a chilling, almost imperceptible smile ghosted across her lips. The smile of a woman who knew the executioner's axe was already swinging. "Is that so, Marcus?" Emily whispered. Her voice was soft, barely more than a breath, but in the suffocating silence, it carried to every dark corner of the dead silent room. To truly understand the sheer, breathtaking audacity of Marcus's betrayal, one had to look back to the cramped, mold-infested apartment in Oakland where their story first began. 10 years prior, Marcus was a failing, disorganized computer science student whose supposedly brilliant ideas were constantly hampered by his total lack of discipline, poor work ethic, and complete absence of funding. Emily had been a brilliant graduate student in data architecture, working 3 agonizing shifts, smelling of stale coffee from a local diner, dusting shelves at a campus library, and tutoring undergrads just to keep the electricity on, buy the groceries, and keep Marcus fed while he ideated. Marcus loved to tell the glowing tech magazines, like Wired and Fast Company, that he had built his first server out of spare, scavenged parts in a friend's garage. He conveniently, routinely omitted the fact that Emily had tearfully sold her late grandmother's vintage, heirloom jewelry just to buy those crucial parts. He told Forbes in a cover interview that his eureka moment for his highly coveted proprietary cloud compression algorithm came to him during an isolated, spiritual solo hike in the Redwoods. He neglected to mention that Emily had actually written the foundational, complex code for that very algorithm as part of her grueling master's thesis. She had allowed him to use it to launch the company under the naive, loving assumption that they were a deeply bonded team. "What's mine is yours forever," he had whispered to her on their cheap mattress on their wedding night. But as the millions started rolling in, the narrative swiftly and cruelly shifted. Marcus began attending elite, invitation-only tech galas in Silicon Valley without her, coldly claiming her vibe and background didn't match the aggressive, venture capitalist world he now inhabited. He started subtly hiding money in complex offshore accounts, systematically funneling company profits through a maze of dummy corporations. Emily knew things in their marriage were bad, sensing the growing emotional chasm, but she didn't realize the horrifying extent of his financial deceit until she quietly hired a forensic accountant who had previously worked for the prestigious firm PricewaterhouseCoopers. The resulting audit, which took weeks of agonizing, clandestine research, revealed a staggering labyrinth of financial abuse, missing millions, and forged signatures. Worse than the stolen money, however, was Vanessa. Vanessa was the 24-year-old newly appointed vice president of marketing, whom Marcus had hired less for her mediocre resume and far more for her willingness to endlessly stroke his fragile, bloated ego. Emily had found the sickening late-night texts, the 5-star hotel receipts from supposed business trips, and the receipt for a $50,000 diamond tennis necklace purchased on a hidden, untraceable black card. When tearfully confronted with the undeniable proof, Marcus didn't apologize. He didn't show an ounce of remorse. Instead, he aggressively gaslit her. He yelled until he was red in the face, telling her she was crazy, hopelessly paranoid, and eventually that she simply wasn't high caliber or sophisticated enough for the wealthy, influential man he had become. He filed for divorce the very next week, executing a vicious, well-funded PR smear campaign among their mutual friends to paint Emily as an unstable, greedy gold digger. Back in the tense atmosphere of the present courtroom, Marcus's lawyer was dramatically presenting a heavily contested prenuptial agreement. Your Honor, I proudly present Exhibit D, a prenuptial agreement signed by Miss Carter exactly 3 days before their wedding, explicitly and permanently waiving her right to any equity, stock options, or profit sharing in Reed Cloud Solutions. Judge Whittaker frowned deeply, examining the document with a highly critical eye. Counsel, this agreement appears to have been signed without any independent legal counsel present for the defendant. Miss Carter, is this true? Did you sign away your rights without a lawyer? It is, Your Honor, Emily said, her voice steady and ringing with truth. Marcus cornered me. He told me that if I didn't sign it right then and there, he would cancel the wedding and leave me with the debt we had accrued. I was young, I loved him desperately, and I foolishly trusted him. He swore to me the company was just a side hobby, and the document was merely a required formality to appease a potential highly paranoid investor. An investor who never existed, Marcus muttered audibly, rolling his eyes dramatically for the gallery. Just another pathetic excuse for her complete incompetence and lack of business acumen. That is absolutely enough, Mr. Reed, Judge Whittaker warned, his voice cracking through the air like a whip. One more outburst, one more disrespectful comment, and I will hold you in contempt of court and have you wait in a holding cell. Marcus sank back into his plush leather chair, a smug, seemingly untouchable smirk plastered securely across his face. He truly believed he had executed the perfect white-collar crime. He had hidden the assets beautifully, he had the ironclad prenup, and he had systematically destroyed her reputation in their social circles. He was finally free. Or so he thought. The afternoon session began with Marcus confidently taking the stand. His attorney lobbed soft, carefully rehearsed softball questions at him, allowing Marcus to paint a heartbreaking portrait of a long-suffering, misunderstood genius burdened by a lazy, endlessly demanding wife. Mr. Reed, could you please describe for the court Miss Carter's actual involvement in the day-to-day grueling operations of your company? The attorney asked, pacing dramatically in front of the witness stand. Non-existent, Marcus replied smoothly, adjusting the microphone to ensure his deep voice resonated perfectly. He looked directly at the jury box, playing to an invisible audience of sympathetic admirers. Emily preferred to spend her days lounging at luxury spas or maxing out credit cards, shopping online. I worked 18-hour days, bleeding for this company to secure our future. When I begged her to help with even basic administrative tasks, answering emails, organizing files, she claimed it was beneath her intellect. I essentially built a multi-million-dollar tech empire with a massive lead weight chained to my ankle. Emily's lawyer, a sharp, fiercely unpretentious woman named Sarah Jenkins, rose slowly for cross-examination. She didn't pace. She simply stared Marcus down. Mr. Reed, you boldly claim your wife contributed nothing. Yet, banking records from 2016 through 2019 show that Miss Carter paid the entirety of your apartment rent, all the groceries, your health insurance, and the high-speed internet bills for 3 consecutive years while you sat at home developing your software. Is that correct? Marcus scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. She was a waitress and a tutor. She paid a few minor, insignificant living expenses. I repaid her tenfold by elevating her entirely out of poverty and giving her a life of unimaginable luxury. I owe her absolutely nothing else. And the core compression algorithm, Sarah pressed, stepping closer, her eyes narrowing. The very foundation of Reed Cloud Solutions. The technology that makes your company worth $60 million. Did you write every single line of that incredibly complex code yourself, without any assistance? Marcus didn't even blink. The lie came entirely too easy to him. Absolutely. It came from my brain alone. It is my exclusive intellectual property. Sarah glanced back at Emily, who gave a nearly imperceptible, confirming nod. I see. And what about the crucial seed funding, Mr. Reed? In late 2018, your company was drowning. You were on the verge of total bankruptcy. You were formally rejected by Sequoia Capital, Andreessen Horowitz, and virtually every commercial bank in the state of California. Then, miraculously, An anonymous angel investor injected a life-saving $2 million into your LLC through a highly secretive blind trust called the Obsidian Group. Tell the court who exactly is the Obsidian Group. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his polished smirk faltering for a fraction of a second as a bead of sweat formed at his hairline. I don't know. I never met them. It was a blind trust managed by an intermediary firm. They believed in my incredible vision when no one else did. They remain a silent partner, holding 30% equity in the firm. A completely silent partner who single-handedly saved your company from oblivion and by extension rescued your entire livelihood and reputation, Sarah noted dryly. No further questions for this witness, Your Honor. Marcus stepped down from the stand, visibly relieved, radiating a toxic mix of premature victory and adrenaline. As he walked past the defense table, he shot Emily a look of pure, unadulterated malice. He subtly mouthed the words, "You lose, trash." Judge Whitaker looked up at the large wall clock. Does the defense have any final witnesses they wish to call before we recess for the day? Sarah Jenkins stood up, meticulously smoothing the lapels of her suit jacket. Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls its final vital witness. We call Eleanor Carter to the stand. Marcus frowned deeply, his brow furrowing in genuine, utter confusion. Eleanor? Emily's mother? What could that frail old woman possibly do? He remembered Eleanor as a quiet, rigidly frugal, retired public school teacher who lived somewhere in rural Georgia. He'd allowed Emily to visit her exactly twice in 10 long years, largely because he had actively, manipulatively prevented it, constantly claiming her low-class family was a liability to their new, elite Silicon Valley image. The heavy oak double doors at the absolute back of the courtroom swung open with a slow, dramatic, echoing creak. Every head in the room, from the bailiff to the stenographer, turned in unison. Eleanor Carter did not merely walk, she glided. She was a striking woman in her late 60s, radiating an aura of absolute, terrifying, unshakable authority. She wore a pristine, impeccably tailored Chanel suit in a muted, powerful charcoal grey, a string of flawless, luminescent South Sea pearls resting delicately at her collar. Her silver hair was pulled back into an elegant, unforgiving chignon, and her dark eyes, the exact same deep, calculating eyes as Emily's, were fixed with laser-like precision squarely on Marcus Reed. Marcus felt a sudden, inexplicable, icy chill run violently down his spine. His breath hitched. This was not the meek, impoverished, cardigan-wearing schoolteacher he vaguely remembered dismissing a decade ago. This woman moved like a ruling monarch entering a recently conquered territory. She walked purposefully past Marcus without granting him so much as a single passing glance, the sharp heels of her designer shoes clicking a steady, intimidating rhythm against the hardwood floor. She stepped gracefully into the witness box, placed her steady hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. The whole truth. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was rich velvet tightly wrapped around hardened steel. State your full name for the record, the clerk requested, slightly intimidated by her presence. Eleanor Grace Carter, she replied flawlessly, her gaze shifting to Judge Whitaker with a respectful nod. Sarah Jenkins approached the stand, a triumphant gleam in her eye. Mrs. Carter, thank you for traveling so far to be here. Could you please tell the court what your current primary occupation is? Marcus, panic rising in his chest, leaned over to his lawyer and hissed aggressively. Objection relevance. She's a retired public school teacher on a fixed pension. What the hell does this have to do with my multi-million-dollar tech company? Before Marcus's highly paid lawyer could even formulate a formal objection, Eleanor answered with devastating calm. I proudly retired from teaching 20 years ago, Ms. Jenkins. Teaching was my passion, a way to give back to my community. I retired to take over managing my family's generational estate. Currently, I am the CEO and primary controlling shareholder of a highly successful private equity firm based in Atlanta. A massive murmur of shock rippled through the crowded gallery. Marcus physically blinked, his brain desperately, frantically trying to process the impossible words. Private equity firm? Generational estate? Emily had grown up in a tiny, run-down house. She had worked 3 minimum wage jobs. She ate ramen noodles for years. This made absolutely zero sense. And what exactly is the legal name of your private equity firm, Mrs. Carter? Sarah asked, her voice ringing clear and triumphant in the suddenly silent room. Eleanor slowly, deliberately turned her head. Her dark eyes locked onto Marcus's suddenly pale, terrified face, pinning him like a specimen to a board. The Obsidian Group, Eleanor said. The silence that instantly followed was absolute, heavy, and crushing. It was the kind of horrifying silence that immediately precedes a catastrophic avalanche. Marcus literally stopped breathing. The blood drained from his face so rapidly, he looked as though he were suffering a massive cardiac event right there at the table. His high-priced lawyer's jaw dropped completely open, an expensive Mont Blanc pen slipping limply from his fingers to clatter loudly on the mahogany surface. "I'm sorry, excuse me, could you repeat that for the record?" Judge Whittaker asked, leaning far forward over his bench, suddenly highly, intensely intrigued by the explosive turn of events. "The Obsidian Group, Your Honor," Eleanor repeated, her articulation flawless and cutting. "I am the sole proprietor and founder. In 2018, my daughter came to me in tears. She told me the man she loved was failing miserably. She begged me to help him save his dream, but she knew his fragile, toxic ego was far too massive to ever accept a handout from a black woman he openly perceived as fundamentally beneath him. So, to protect his pride and her marriage, I created a blind trust. I personally wired $2 million to Reed Cloud Solutions to save it from total bankruptcy." Marcus began violently hyperventilating, his chest heaving under his Tom Ford suit. "That's a lie!" he shrieked, leaping to his feet, pure panic utterly destroying his carefully cultivated, cool guy facade. "She's lying. This is a setup. She's trying to steal my company." "Sit down and shut your mouth, Mr. Reed," Judge Whittaker bellowed, slamming his wooden gavel with enough ferocious force to nearly crack the wood. "One more word out of you, one more syllable, and you will spend the entire night in a holding cell. Continue with your questioning, Miss Jenkins." Sarah approached the judge's bench, pulling documents from a thick, heavy manila folder. "Your Honor, I have here the original unredacted corporate filings, the direct bank transfer receipts, and the ironclad trust documents, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that Eleanor Carter, acting via the Obsidian Group, is the sole angel investor who provided the critical capital that saved Reed Cloud Solutions. The damning documents were passed up to the judge, who reviewed them with rapidly widening eyes, tracing the unmistakable financial paper trail. He then passed the copies down to Marcus's lawyer, who looked at the pages as if they were covered in radioactive, flesh-eating material. "But that is certainly not all, Your Honor," Sarah continued, turning her attention back to Eleanor. "Mrs. Carter, as the majority, controlling investor, did you require any specific collateral or legal guarantees for this massive $2 million investment?" "I most certainly did," Eleanor said, her voice dripping with refined, aristocratic disdain as she looked down her nose at Marcus. "I am a businesswoman. I required that the core compression algorithm, the exact intellectual property that powers the entire functionality of the company, be officially patented, copyrighted, and registered under its true author's name before I transferred a single solitary cent." Sarah handed a second devastating document to the judge. "Exhibit F, Your Honor. The official United States Patent and Trademark Office registration for the cloud compression algorithm currently heavily utilized by Reed Cloud Solutions, filed legally and permanently in 2017. The registered author, creator, and sole owner of the intellectual property is absolutely not Marcus Reed." Sarah turned smoothly on her heel, pointing dramatically at the defendant's table where Emily sat like a serene statue. "It is Emily Carter." The courtroom absolutely erupted. Reporters in the back rows frantically began typing on their phones, sensing the tech scandal of the decade. Marcus collapsed back into his chair like a puppet with its strings brutally cut, gasping for air, his hands trembling so violently he had to grip the edge of the table to steady himself. "Emily?" Marcus choked out, a pathetic, strangled sound escaping his throat as he stared at his wife in pure, unadulterated horror. Emily finally, slowly looked at him. The mask of sorrow and victimhood was completely gone, entirely replaced by the cold, unyielding, terrifying strength of a brilliant queen who had just flawlessly checkmated her arrogant opponent. She had known absolutely everything all along. She had let him run his venomous mouth. She had let him confidently perjure himself on the federal stand. She had let him enthusiastically dig his own massive grave, and now she was happily throwing the dirt right in his face. Furthermore, Your Honor, Sarah Jenkins raised her powerful voice over the chaotic din of the room. Because Mr. Reed forcefully coerced his wife to sign a prenuptial agreement under extreme emotional and financial duress, specifically excluding her from the corporate assets of Reed Cloud Solutions, we vehemently argue that the prenup is entirely legally invalid. But even if it were deemed valid, the tech company itself is effectively financially worthless without the legal right to use the algorithm. And that algorithm belongs solely, completely, to Miss Emily Carter. Furthermore, since the Obsidian Group legally owns 30% of the company equity, and Emily owns the core IP that makes it function, Marcus Reed is in stark reality nothing more than a minority share, highly expendable employee of his own wife. The total devastation of Marcus Reed was swift, absolute, and utterly merciless. Within 20 short minutes, the grand, glittering illusion of his invincible tech empire crumbled into pathetic, worthless dust. Judge Harold Whitaker, his face flushed with righteous judicial anger, leaned over his high bench and looked down at Marcus as if he were looking at a diseased cockroach. Mr. Reed, in my 30 years sitting on this bench, I have rarely, if ever, witnessed such breathtaking, monumental arrogance, profound deceit, and sheer, blinding stupidity. You sat in my courtroom under oath and called your brilliant wife worthless trash. You testified confidently that she contributed nothing to your success. You committed flagrant, documented perjury regarding the authorship of your company's core technological asset. Marcus was openly weeping now. Real, ugly, desperate tears of sheer panic streaked heavily down his face, ruining his expensive cologne and smearing his manicured image. The bespoke Tom Ford suit was now wrinkled, stained with the sweat of his own sudden desperation. Your Honor, please, I beg you. I didn't know. You didn't know because you were far too blinded by your own toxic narcissism to see the brilliant, devoted, extraordinary women who were physically and financially holding up your entire world. Judge Whitaker thundered, his voice echoing off the oak panels. You have weaponized the sacred institution of marriage and the legal system to feed your own ego. I am immediately striking the prenuptial agreement from the record as highly fraudulent and signed under extreme, verifiable duress. Furthermore, based on the deeply disturbing evidence presented by the defense's PwC accounting team regarding your hidden offshore accounts, I am officially referring this entire case to the District Attorney's Office and the IRS for a severe criminal investigation into perjury, massive wire fraud, and federal tax evasion. Marcus let out a guttural, agonizing sob, burying his tear-soaked face in his shaking hands. His lawyer, recognizing a sinking, burning ship, slowly and quietly packed up his leather briefcase. He leaned over to whisper into Marcus's ear, I'm dropping you as a client, Marcus, effective immediately. You're going to federal prison and you certainly can't afford my hourly rate anymore. The judge slammed his heavy gavel with brutal finality. Miss Carter is immediately awarded full, unmitigated control of her intellectual property, massive back pay for royalties legally owed for the unlicensed use of her algorithm over the past 4 years, and quite frankly, whatever scraps are left of this company after the IRS inevitably tears through Mr. Reed. Court is adjourned. As the stunned gallery rapidly cleared, Emily stood up with elegant poise. She smoothed the skirt of her navy dress, completely unfazed by the chaos. Marcus literally crawled toward her, grabbing the edge of her table with desperate white-knuckled fingers, his face a pathetic, smeared mask of tears and snot. "Emily, baby, please," he begged, his voice cracking into a high-pitched whine. "We can fix this. I love you, I swear I do. I was stupid, I was blind. Vanessa means absolutely nothing to me. She was a mistake. Please, I'm begging you, don't take everything from me. I'll be totally ruined." Emily looked down at him. She didn't feel pity. She didn't feel anger. She felt only the hollow, beautiful, cleansing relief of a malignant tumor being successfully, permanently excised from her life. She thought about the agonizing nights she had cried herself to sleep while he was popping champagne in five-star hotels with his mistress. She thought about the horrifying moment he had stood in open court and mocked her race, her background, and her fundamental human worth. "You're actually right about exactly one thing, Marcus," Emily said softly, her voice echoing coldly in the now empty courtroom. "I came into this marriage with absolutely nothing. But thanks to my mother's foresight and the undeniable brilliance of my own mind, I'm leaving with your entire world, Aya." She confidently turned her back on him, linked her arm lovingly through her mother's, and walked proudly out of the heavy oak doors. She left Marcus Reed sobbing uncontrollably on the dirty floor, completely surrounded by the shattered, unsalvageable ruins of his own colossal ego. 6 highly publicized months later, the global tech world was completely rocked by the official, highly anticipated launch of Carter Cloud Systems. Emily Carter stood confidently at the glowing acrylic podium in the grand crystal chandeliered ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria, wearing a stunning, custom-tailored white power suit. She was absolutely glowing, commanding the massive room filled with tech journalists and elite investors with effortless, magnetic grace. Beside her stood her mother, Eleanor, smiling with deep, quiet pride. Marcus, predictably, was nowhere to be seen. In the immediate fallout following the trial, Vanessa had ruthlessly dumped him the exact moment she realized his platinum bank accounts were entirely frozen by the feds. He had been swiftly evicted from his multi-million-dollar glass penthouse and was currently residing in a tiny, windowless, smelling of stale beer studio apartment on the outskirts of the city. He wore a bulky, blinking GPS ankle monitor 24/7 while anxiously awaiting a high-profile federal trial for 3 felony counts of tax fraud and embezzlement. The millions he thought he had so cleverly hidden in the Caymans had been seized by the government to help pay off the massive civil judgments rightfully awarded to Emily. For years, brilliant women, especially brilliant black women, have been the hidden, uncredited architects behind the scenes of major industry. Emily spoke clearly into the microphone, addressing a massive crowd of flashing cameras, cheering investors, and inspired young engineers. "We are the true backbone of the digital age. We build the foundations, we write the impossible codes, and we provide the silent, unyielding strength that allows massive empires to rise. Today, my friends, we are no longer silent. We are no longer hidden in the shadows of arrogant men. We are the creators, and we are the owners." The massive crowd erupted in a deafening, roaring, standing ovation. Emily looked out at the sea of inspired faces, her heart completely full, her incredible spirit beautifully unbroken. She had been dragged mercilessly through the mud, viciously insulted, and profoundly betrayed by the man she had promised to love. But fire absolutely doesn't destroy pure gold, it only refines it, burning away the impurities. Marcus Reed had tried to throw her away like worthless trash, but in the end, she had simply taken out the garbage herself. Wow, talk about the absolute ultimate satisfying backfire. Marcus truly, delusionally believed his toxic arrogance, manipulation, and stolen wealth would win the day. But he severely, hilariously underestimated the quiet, lethal brilliance of the woman he married, and the absolute financial powerhouse that was her mother. Emily didn't just get even, she completely leveled up. She took back her power, her stolen intellect, and her rightful tech empire, leaving Marcus with the exact, miserable nothingness he so cruelly tried to force on her. Karma really does never miss a deadline, especially when it comes with a forensic accountant. If you absolutely loved seeing justice served ice cold and a strong, brilliant woman reclaiming her undeniable worth, make sure to smash that like button right now. Share this incredible story of triumph and revenge with your friends who love a jaw-dropping plot twist. And please don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss out on our